Well, hello there. Thanks for joining me. I am Dr. Jen. I am so pleased that you've joined me for today's show. This, of course, is My Life as a Landlord. And I recently learned from our guest today that the majority of Americans do not have any estate plan of any kind. Wow. This means that when someone passes away, there is no guidance or legal direction, and the assets then go to probate, which can take a while. And then when the assets are in other geographic locations, the probate aspect gets even crazier. Here to tell us more about this and more, welcome Oscar Vasquez. Hi, Oscar.
Hi. Well, thank you so very much, Doctor, for allowing me to or helping me on my crusade on bringing awareness to probate and estate planning. Thank you for that.
You're welcome. You're welcome. Now, you're not a lawyer, right? Truth be told, you're
No.
not a lawyer, but you do have a history in real estate, and then you got into estate planning. Tell us how that all unfolded.
Oh wow. Okay, so I'll go back. Well, I've been in the real estate business for about 28 years.
Okay.
And we started and in the real estate business, the older that you get, the more people that you know that are going to die. I don't know if you noticed that, but
Oh,
but
sadly.
but the older we become, the more funerals we attend. Well, those of us that are local, right? And what happened with our client base, we noticed that a lot of them started going under probate. So we started educating our clients and we started to refer them about 10 years ago to real estate attorneys, estate attorneys. And 10 years ago, an estate plan to have an attorney done is about $600. Now it's $5,000 to $10,000, depending on how complex.
Wow.
So one of the things that we did is we created a software to make estate planning affordable for the masses.
Okay.
And how we did that is how that works is we first have to understand what an estate plan is, and it's a living trust. An estate plan is an umbrella with different pillars to be able to protect our assets. But the main pillar is, or the stick that holds everything together, it's called a living trust. And the living trust is, in the simplest form, is a contract or an agreement between you or the trustee and the beneficiaries, which are usually your kids, right, or your grandkids. And in some cases, I just helped somebody with a case. I'm not leaving my kids anything. I'm leaving it all to my grandkids. So, okay, that was an interesting take. I said, Isn't it the same?" But I guess it's not. Um, and so the agreement is that the courts, and they call it a contract because the courts enforce the legal provisions. So every state has a certain legal provision in order to prevent you from going to probate. So now that you understand that an attorney does not have to draw it up, we have a comprehensive estate plan, which means a complete plan that has about 19 different documents that can come in depending on the level of complexity of that you want to have. But that is what is an estate plan, and we do not give legal advice, but we help you through the process of creating a comprehensive estate plan.
Nice. And what's your background with real estate?
I've owned a property management. I'll give you some of my background. I we had a about a 1,300 real estate company. We had, we've been in the mortgage. We had a mortgage company that would service it, escrow. So we've been involved with thousands and thousands of real estate transactions. And we sold that just before the crash, and then we kind of retired for a little bit, and then we came back and kind of do something. It was 10 years ago. I was only 44, and I was like, man, I still got some energy left. Let's go do something else. So, and I've been in real estate for 28 years, and we've helped. We had a. I mean, it wasn't too large. We manage several hundred units, several hundred doors, units, single family residents throughout the area, and managing it. And we got an offer that we couldn't refuse to sell the portfolio. So we ended up selling that business and exited out of that. And that's kind of, we've been down that road. And one of the common factors that we see is that 100% of homeowners that does not have a living trust goes to probate. And that means, you know, here's one thing I like to tell listeners. You want to know if you're going to go to probate? Google this. Google what's the maximum threshold to go to that needs to go to probate. So for example, in Indiana, like for example, if you Google what's the maximum threshold to go to probate in Indiana, the answer should be $50,000. In Colorado, it's 60. In Utah, it's 100. In California, it's 184.5.
In Hawaii, I just Googled it. In Hawaii, it's 100,000.
Wow. There you go.
Yeah.
So that means is there anything in Hawaii? Well, I think probably not even raw land is worth more than 100,000, right?
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. So that means so what I noticed is 100% of homeowners would go to probate. And then when I heard the horror stories, like I always tell people that say, you know what, I give them a presentation and they're like, well, we want to think about it. I said, don't think about it. Go talk to all your friends and family and ask them to tell you if they know anybody that went through probate. And have them tell you their stories of what happened to them, and if they could avoid it, would they? And then you could decide if you want your kids to go through that or not. And then people that go do that homework come back 100% of the time because they do not want their kids to go through probate. Now, in California, starting probate fees are almost $50,000. That is in California.
Oh my
That
goodness.
is today, right? And every state varies, but it's because the real estate is so high, right? So and our average real estate is, $750,000. So the value of the real estate, what happens is in California, and I don't know if every state has this, but in California, they have a maximum amount an attorney could charge for probate based on the value of the estate.
Oh, I see.
So that means the more money you have, the more money you sacrificed, saved, and accumulated, the more money you have to pay because you're a saver.
So let me see if I understand this, Oscar. So for the listeners, my listeners are in the US and Canada. And so we're primarily talking about the US side, which I totally get. And the question is that for the listeners here who are very likely homeowners, because this is my life as a landlord, so they're very likely a landlord, which means they're a homeowner.
Right.
In the state that they own their US assets, very likely just them having the one asset is enough to be over the threshold to go to probate if they don't have some kind of estate plan. Am I right on that?
That is exactly right.
Okay.
And now, it doesn't get any simpler than that. Like who's going to go? No, but people don't realize. And here's the thing. I think there's a different part of our life. Like in our 30s, we think we're never going to die. In our 40s, we think, you know what, we may die. In our 50s, we go, we know we're going to die. Right. And then in our 60s, we're like, oh my God, I think the days are numbered. But it's funny, but it's getting closer. I mean, they say, I think there was a TikTok that had a string, and they say, if this was your life, if you're 40, you're like this, you only have this much left. And I was like, wow.
Oh,
what about putting that in concept? What about putting that in concept, right?
Well, let's talk about this, because there's a lot of people who listen to landlord podcasts in general that they either are or they want to be remote landlords, meaning they're owning real estate in other places, in other states. So if I'm in California, I know you're in Southern California. So if I'm in California and I own stuff in California, but I want to buy something in, say, Texas, how would that work with probate, or are there different thresholds? Like, how is it for all these different locations?
One living trust is good for every state in the land. As long as, so what happens is this, the trust is kind of figured like an umbrella, and you have to put assets, it's called funding the asset into the trust. So what happens is if you have a property in Georgia, you have to
Mhm.
change the deed. You have to fund it into the trust, transfer the deed, which is usually a grant deed or a quick claim. Now it's a very simple thing. Many people use a quick claim, but the right document is a grant deed because a quick claim says if I own this property, I transfer it. A grant deed says I own it and I transfer it. So the appropriate deed is called a grant deed to transfer the asset into the trust, but it has to be, it's called, the legal term is called funding. You fund the asset into the trust, and you could do that to any asset and any property that you own anywhere in the land, and it's recognized and it prevents it from going to probate because
Gotcha.
it's in the trust.
Okay.
As long as the provisions is where you reside, right? So if you reside in Canada, there's international provisions that can be done.
Okay.
Like, I just found out yesterday, because we don't have every provision that, I mean, things coming up now. I think we're gonna get ready to hire an attorney on staff to do it. Now, yesterday we had somebody that owned international property in Europe and Mexico, and they wanted to know if they had an international provision that they can have it to protect it. Well, there's a provision that exists for international property in the US.
Cool.
I did not know that. So we're in the process of adding that to the provisions in our software. So if you say yes, I own international property, you'll be able to click on it and that provision will pop into there automatically. So
Fantastic. Well, hey, Oscar, I know you and I have talked a bit about generational wealth, and you said something that absolutely made me laugh out loud. So we're talking about generational wealth, supporting people in that, and then you said, "I want to make sure that there's a drunk uncle clause."
oh
What
yeah.
is a drunk uncle clause?
Oh my God. So that was part of, because okay, that's a great one. But here's what it is. It's part of your
Okay.
guardianship. It's called the guardianship plan for your children. Like if you have children under the age of 18 in the state of California, and I can only refer because I know this, I know what happens in California because
Sure.
I've been a long time residency, but I've spoken to other people from other states say, oh, that happens here too. What happens to your children is if you don't have a guardianship plan that comes with a comprehensive living trust, they go to what's called they go to social services, which is called social services, and which I call it child jail, right?
Child jail. Oh boy.
Child
Okay.
jail, social services. So what happens? I'll give you a scenario. Um, Mom and dad go to dinner. They leave the kids with the babysitter for the night, and they go to dinner and they don't come back. They get into a car accident, they become incapacitated.
Yeah.
The hospital finds out they're not there. They send the sheriffs and they go pick up the kids and put them in social services until they can get a hold of a family member or find out what's going to happen to the children.
Sure.
To prevent that from happening with with a comprehensive living trust, you have what's called a guardianship plan, and the guardianship plan has three clauses. One is who's going to take care of your kids temporarily, which means 3 to 6 months, 3 to 12 to 18 months temporarily. The second one is a provision that says if you die, because the temporary means if you become incapacitated, who's going to take care of your kids? The second provision is what happens to your kids if you die. Who do you want them to take care of? And we always say pick three because things may change.
Sure.
And then the third one is the who do you not want your kids to be with? And that's the drunk uncle clause that I call the drunk uncle clause.
Aw.
No, because sometimes the drunk uncle, we all have one. I think there's very, very few. When people say, well, I don't have one, I say, well, because your family ain't big enough. Right?
Right.
If your family is not large enough, you don't have any black sheep in your family, right? Or you don't have the one that is just that likes talking politics and knows everything about everything, but just doesn't do anything. But when you have a large enough family, we all have different different shades in there. But that's what I meant when we have that, because that's one of the documents that come in. But back to estate planning, back to the main fundamental of the. So I want to cover a couple great reasons what probate is, because here's an interesting statistic: 68% of homeowners or people that own real estate do not have a living trust. So that means 68% are guaranteed to go to probate. That means here's what happens in probate, guys. The first thing that happens is they publish all your assets. And they say, if you think that you're a beneficiary, or this guy owes you money, Oscar owes you money, or Jennifer owes you money, you need to come forward and file a claim. And if you think that you're a benefactor, you think that you should be a benefactor, come forward and file it and let us know, because we want to make sure you get your fair share of this assets. The second thing that happens, or before that happens, I'm sorry, the first thing is you have to hire an attorney. And the attorney usually says one of two things. Great, it's X, which is, and let's just use California, it's $50,000 to go through the state. And if your kids say, well, I don't have 50,000, mom didn't leave me a life policy, but she left me all this real estate. They say, no problem. Sign this piece of paper. After we get you title to the property and you're free and clear, you can pay me after you sell the home, right? Now they're forced to liquidate the asset. That's the first thing that they're going to, or they have to refinance it. They have to borrow against it, get into some kind of a payment plan, but that's still, now keep into consideration, take into consideration, this is if the house is paid off. If the house is not paid off, you got to have an emergency hearing, which means that you have to pay a little bit more money because it's an emergency, right? So the next parte. So then that's the first problem. That's the first headache and pressure that gets into the kids or to your benefactors. The first. The second problem is that they publish it. The third problem that they have is that once the government publishes it and they get it in there, then the court makes the final decision on what happens to your assets, right? That they make the final decision because that's the government's plan. And the government's plan is simple. If you meet the threshold, that means you have enough money to pay us to make decisions for you because you failed to make those decisions yourself. So we want to protect you and make sure that the appropriate people get the benefit from your assets of savings, right? That's basically what it says when the government says they'll make the final decision. And then the third thing, or the fourth thing that happens in probate is that there's possible tax consequences.
Right.
And we all own real estate, and I say we all because I have my nice little portfolio that I've been blessed to have, and but we all own it, but we sacrificed a lot to have it. And one of the last things we want to do is I've kept property for 15 years. I don't want to sell it because, man, I bought it so cheap. It's kind of crazy to sell it, right? And it's worth so much more. And I'm just amazed. But they may be forced to sell it to be able to liquidate, pay the taxes, pay the attorney, and be able to get into the inheritance tax. So those are the things that most people don't take into consideration. Now, here's the most painful part is that it takes anywhere from 12 to 18 months to settle probate. That means your benefactors, let's just say they have a mortgage, they're forced to sell the house, and they say, okay, now you got all this money sitting in an account that they do not have access to for 12 to 18 months in case somebody comes up and says, hey, this guy owed me money. Oscar owed me money before he died. So they don't settle the account for the next 6 to 18 months, right? 12 to 18 months. So those are the four things. 100% of people will go that own a home or own real estate will go to probate if you exceed the threshold. The second thing is that it becomes public, so people will know what you have and what you don't have. Two, you may have it be subject to higher taxes, takes a long time, and then you're gonna pay an attorney 60,000 or more, depending on the amount of assets that you have. And the worst thing I think of all of that, I think the most painful for me, anyways, that got me, that really spoke to me was the fact that the government decides what happened. Now, I haven't read a case or known of a case where they say, oh, you got 4 kids, I'm only going to give money to these 3 and not that guy, right?
Right.
I haven't seen that. They give it, they mostly give it, but I'll give you an instance where they had a family member, a man, a gentleman. He didn't have an estate plan, but he had a family. He had a young family that he got a divorce and left Texas, came to California, started a new family, passed away, had a nice little nest egg, had a nice little real estate portfolio, and he had 4 kids here, and he wanted them to be the sole benefactors of his assets. And the 3 other kids showed up. So instead of getting 25%, they got 1/7 of the estate because the courts awarded them the 1/7 because to the other 3 children, because the father didn't have an estate plan, and the courts decided that was the fairest thing. Now, if you have an adopted child, but you love them as your own, I say, I think parenting is not like who gives birth, but who raised them, right? And if you have an adopted child, that you want them to be a benefactor because you love them, right? That's who are. I always tell people I think estate planning is for the things that we are the closest to our heart, which is our loved ones and our money. Right?
Oh my goodness.
So in Richard, that's so you want to avoid those things by having an estate plan.
I gotcha. So you became a software person and you developed the software.
No,
How,
I didn't
okay,
develop it. I just paid
okay,
to develop it, right?
okay,
I'm not that smart. But no,
okay,
yeah, we ended up doing this locally, so it became something affordable. And
gotcha.
now we're on an awareness campaign to be able to bring awareness to the country because 68% of people that own a house are going to go to probate.
Right,
That's, I mean,
right.
I, that's insane. I always tell people, like, if you knew for sure that probate and the cost of a living trust was going to be more tomorrow, would you do it today, right?
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
taxes, I don't think the taxes are going down. I mean, we can claim that, but I haven't seen that ever come down.
Yeah, I don't think that's going to happen.
Yeah. Um, I don't think that. And then two, the cost of probate goes up, and the cost of living trusts have gone up. So
Hmm.
if it's affordable and it's affordable there and it's there and it's there, I just think it's something that is reachable. So that's what we did.
So that's your goal, is to educate, and ultimately you want people to use your software and pay for it, but ultimately you don't want people to go through the agony of probate. That's what I'm hearing.
Yeah, you know what? Because here's the thing. You know, money is really close and dear to my heart, and I think it should be to everybody's because we work, we sacrifice, and we don't accumulate unless you sacrifice other things, right? Because
Hmm.
it all takes some part of that, and I think and I don't think that people that don't have an estate plan or the 68%, I think they don't have one because they don't know what happens when they die, or they haven't thought about it, or there's not enough awareness to be able to bring it. And once you know that your loved ones are going to go through this, and then your money's going to turn into water or given to somebody else that you didn't want, and you could have prevented it.
Right.
I always tell people, now you know you can't unknow. Now you've seen it, you can't unsee it. Right?
Gotcha. Yeah.
It's one of them things.
Yeah. If a listener wants to get a hold of you, how do they learn more about your software? How do they get a hold of you, Oscar?
Yeah, I'm gonna give you a couple things.
Sure.
I want to give you a couple things. The first thing that I want to give you is I want to give you what's called a free comprehensive estate plan guide. Now, this guide takes away, if you can fill out this guide takes away the human effect of the human effect or the human delay of filling out an estate plan. And the reason why I say that is because there's questions that come up in the estate plan that has the human effect of delay. And so one of the things is estate.prep.com/guide, estate.prep/guide, and that would give you a free comprehensive guide. Now, for full warning, just because you can fill this out doesn't mean that you have an estate plan or a living trust.
Right.
Right? Even though it's comprehensive, there's a lot of questions, there's a lot of detailed explanation. There's no legal provisions, it's not there. It's a guide to help you understand it. The second thing that I like to give you is access to a free artificial intelligence voice answering service that you can ask anything that you want in any state in the state. Now, if you say that you're in Canada, you call it, it'll talk to you, but it will say we're not programmed to answer anything in Canada.
Sure.
However, if you live in the United States and you want to stay, you can ask for provisions. You can say, hey, what about this? You have a different scenario. You go in and do that. You can go 805-909-4689, 805-909-4689. And the last thing I like to give you is a discount code. I like to give you discount code is a landlord. That is, if you use a landlord as a discount code, you will save $1,000 on the lifetime value of this software. Now, why is that impossible? Why is that important? Here's why. To get an estate plan put in place, it's anywhere from $4,000 to $5,000. With this discount code, you can check out for $14.95. However, every time an estate, it's a living trust and living estate plan, and it needs to be renewed. Every time you renew it, you go through an attorney, it's $1,800, $1,200 to $1,800. If you renew it twice or make a change, or you can fund it and unfund it without adding provisions. I'm saying if you get new grandkids or you get a new kid, new child, new beneficiary, want a new program, want to update that would require an update and a restatement. And that usually costs $1,200. With our software, it's $129. Once you pay it once, it'll be available for you forever. And you'll have access to make as many changes as you want every year for $129 thereafter. You only pay the $129 the year that you want the update. And the reason for that is because we have all the legal provisions throughout the United States. And that means that we hire an attorney to update all the provisions every year. So if you require an update, that helps offset the expense for all the legal provisions. That's what I have as far as your gifts. Take advantage of it. There's a lot more information about estate planning. The biggest one, though, the biggest reason is one, people avoid it for probate. The second one is they want to make sure that their kids know exactly what they want.
Right. Yeah. Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for helping us understand why estate planning is so important. And geographics, plays a part in all this. So that's really important. And I'm excited. Thank you so much for all the education and the gifts. Any parting thoughts?
I would say this, that tomorrow is too late. Right? I mean, no, yesterday is too late. Tomorrow's not promised. Today is the best time to protect your family and your loved ones and your assets. So take action. Don't wait for tomorrow. Tomorrow will never come.
Love it. Oscar, thanks so much for joining us today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me, Doctor. Thank you, Jennifer.
Thank you.
All right.